This presentation will discuss the creation of ebooks. There is a long list of considerations when looking to address the needs of deaf and hard of hearing learners. To begin, we need to look at the framework used in the creation of ebooks for deaf learners. While some frameworks may fit their needs, not all do. By analyzing the models out there, we can select the features that fit deaf learners' needs and create a new framework. The 5 lenses we will explore are universal design, multimodal learning principles, deaf aesthetics principles, levels of accessibility, and open education resources, OER. By selecting the appropriate elements from each of these models, we can create a new framework appropriate for deaf learners. We'll begin by looking at universal design for deaf learners. The theory of universal design originated at North Carolina State University in 1991. Their center was promoting principles of universal design and accessibility for all people, whether in the built environment or the manufacturing of products. The center's philosophy was broad, not focused on the specific needs of persons with disabilities, but the needs of everyone. Today, most of us, however, do think universal design is geared only toward accessibility for persons with disabilities. A primary principle of universal design is to meet the needs of the broadest number. Any accommodation or adaptation in design undertaken to serve one group cannot be to the detriment of another group. The deaf community came together to carefully consider how the design of educational materials would be accessible for deaf learners. One task the deaf community undertook was to create a specific accessibility checklist of the elements compatible to the learning needs of deaf and hard of hearing students. The National Deaf Center on Post-Secondary Outcomes developed universal design for learning guidelines for classrooms. However, nothing has been done in this regard for ebooks. The center emphasizes that UDL should be focused on the deaf learner's innate strengths, capitalizing on vision and visual processing. The learning environment should provide learning options through various senses, emphasizing visual options. As well, language options should be part of the environment, including sign language. The National Deaf Center states instructional design must include options for self-expression, including signing, writing, and speaking. By the same token, there must be options for comprehension through multimodal learning, using multiple senses such as vision, hearing, touch, movement. Universal design guidelines are sometimes problematic for deaf learners. Let's explore that further. The main issue with current universal design relates to biosocial portals. Biosocial portals link the physical self to our interactions with others. What we find is that universal design is predominantly audiocentric, which means the physical ability to hear dominates our lives, our communication, our language use, and the learning process. Our cultural and language beliefs are connected to our physical experiences. Audiocentric biosocial portals processing starts when we are young, as spoken language begins to develop. Everyone, everything, the whole world is audiocentric. Our world is based on the assumption that everyone can hear. The evidence? Radios, public announcement systems at airports, the volume controls on the TV and all devices, the ubiquity of music in our environment. The whole world is designed for people who can hear. This is where some of the universal design principles are dominated by auditory and spoken language approaches in terms of how the information is provided. In contrast, visuocentrism relies on the visual biosocial portal for processing, not hearing. This is where sign language comes in. It's a visual spatial language. UNICEF has developed prototypes that attempted to incorporate multiple portals. It provides examples of learning design to engage specifically hearing, vision, touch, movement, and interaction when developing accessible ebook. On this slide, you can see one sample I pulled from UNICEF's prototypes. It has text, it has audio track, it has images to aid comprehension. There is a sign language translation in the window in the bottom corner. All those elements are incorporated into the lesson. Let's turn our attention to multimodal learning. Multimodal learning is the next major framework I want to explore. Let's see what the multimodal framework has to offer us with respect to the new framework we set out to create. Multimodal learning is another approach we can incorporate into our ebook design. Let's explore exactly what's involved. Comprehension is supported and enhanced through writing, seeing, spatial, tactile, gestural, auditory, and oral elements. The principle behind this approach is to incorporate as many modalities as possible in the learning process. Multimodal learning takes advantage of multiple mediums, such as print on paper or using a computer, signing using a camera and video, speaking using audio recordings. Multimodal learning uses multiple mediums, which enhances learning. Multimodal learning is about making meaning. In our everyday lives, we are always interpreting what's going on around us, interpreting the words people are using, the meaning of that movie, the point of a text we are reading. We are always in a process of making meaning in our environments. We do that through the representations of meaning, be it speaking, text, video, signing. Obviously, making meaning is through communication. That's why multimodal learning is so complex. It's layered. Many things are happening at the same time. With so many options to consider in multimodal learning, what must we include in the design of an ebook? The design must be strategic, logically connected. We can't just throw a bunch of images, video, and text to appear as visual as possible. Careful thought is needed to structure the content on the screen to support learning. Multimodal digital learning is now getting more attention from researchers. In particular, Carapi and Corbetis did some fascinating research on multimodal digital learning for deaf learners. In their findings, design requirements included sign language dictionaries, excellent search functions, good quality video, along with text. Placement of content on the screen, including images, needs to be carefully considered. There needs to be a flow in the design that supports comprehension and multimodal learning. So the takeaway is that layout and design are key when the goal is to support visual learning. The next framework we are going to consider is deaf aesthetics. Deaf aesthetics deals directly with design and layout to support deaf learners' needs. Let's consider language modes. Does the sign language version of the content have equal real estate on the screen compared to the text? The sign language translation should not be relegated to a small section of the screen. In order for sign language to be understood, it needs to be given enough space so the body, the face, the minute movements of the eyebrows, the mouth can all be seen easily. Whoever is providing the sign language version of the lesson content must themselves be a native signer. That's essential. The sign language content should have place of prominence on the screen and not a pop-up option. Audio tracks should be incorporated too to supplement the learning options. Within a deaf aesthetics design, what do we do with images, text, and video? The screen design should be clean. It should not be too busy. There should be a clear connection between the elements, be they text, video, or images. Each visual element should have an unambiguous purpose. Busyness is visual noise and not conducive to visual learning. Font type, size, shape, spacing can enhance comprehension, another key factor to keep in mind. Think carefully about vocabulary choices. They should be appropriate to the learning audience. Plain language is best. The text should be kept to short passages. Numbering, bullets, and font can be utilized to help with comprehension of text content. Use visual aids such as charts, diagrams, graphs, maps, or other representations that can help clarify or interpret the text. Navigation is particularly important in the deaf aesthetics framework. There's nothing more frustrating than not being able to find what you're looking for. Navigation should allow searches of video thumbnails, images, ASL glosses, or any symbol used in the glossing system. In addition, the search functions need to support text and audio searches. Glossaries will be provided for English and ASL vocabulary. Finding that material through keyword search functions will be important. Interactivity with the text, video, or images needs to be designed into the lesson. For example, after watching a lesson in sign language on video, the student creates their own video version of the content they learned. Navigation tools should be intuitive and effective so students can find their work in order to post it. Depending on the age of the child, they may need instruction and technical support through the steps of creating, saving, and posting videos. Many interactive tools take advantage of visual representations. For example, graphics, video, and editing tools. eBooks has a number of tools that can be used to interactively engage students. All the content on the screen should be language rich, not eye candy. Content should support language acquisition. The design should challenge the learner enough to support their language growth. The sign language models should be diverse in race, gender, appearance, religion, culture, and so on. Lessons should include metalinguistic elements such as analogy, metaphor, personification, and other literary devices. Let's move from deaf aesthetics and look at another framework. I now want to explore levels of accessibility. Keep in mind that many deaf children grow up in environments without exposure to quality language, neither in sign language or spoken language. In those cases, making materials accessible is even more complex. The deaf child will try to hear what they are able in the spoken environments around them. The brain tries to make sense of the inferior input to decipher patterns. Because there are so many gaps, the brain does not develop a proper language system. The brain begins to get hardwired into a deficit of language development. The brain cannot decipher the grammar, vocabulary, concepts being communicated. It's trying to make sense of bits and pieces without any foundation from all the partial input. Over time, the deprivation will become permanent. Some creators of ebooks believe embedding a sign language translation equates to accessibility for deaf learners. But we know now many deaf children are language deprived. Understanding the text or the signing may be beyond their abilities. Research has revealed that there are 3 levels of accessibility for deaf learners. The first level of accessibility relates to the learning management system, or the courseware. This level pertains to the digital hardware used, as well as the course design features like captioning, images, videos, and other material created for the lesson. At this level, we're focusing on how the student interacts with the learning material through the digital interface and management system. Level 1 requires internet stability. Without it, you don't have level 1 accessibility. Spoken and signed media must have captions or subtitles. Videos must be translated. The presentation must have a clean design on the screen. Navigation and search functions are part of level 1 access. Level 2 access focuses on the interactivity between the learner and the content. The lesson design includes components for the learner to interact with and respond to the material. Examples include answering questions, completing a quiz, clicking an icon to start a video, and moving graphics around on the screen for matching exercises. Level 2 accessibility relates to the presentation of content. Examples include PDF files, documents, visual lectures, images, plain language texts, and interactive activities. Developing level 3 accessibility is very complex. The focus of this level is developing language and communication skills. The written content in the lesson must consider the print literacy of the learner and what language challenges they may have. Sign language must be the primary language of instruction. Many online materials are not designed for deaf learners. E-learning material often looks inclusive on the surface, such as captioning videos or providing a transcript of audiovisual content. This appears to be accessible, but often does not meet the needs of deaf learners. Content translated into sign language is restricted to the camera frame. So if I'm pointing to something in the distance, the viewer cannot see what it is because of the limits of the camera frame. Am I pointing to the sky, a tree? You don't know because you can't see it. If I am sitting down, you don't know if I'm sitting on a couch, a chair, or even on the ground because it's below the frame. It's important to understand that visual spatial languages require everything to be seen in the frame. Most ebook creations don't incorporate these visual references. Deaf students benefit from immediate feedback. If they are misunderstanding or headed in the wrong direction, they need quick corrections to get them back on track. Delayed corrections or feedback will lead to confusion and lost time. The lesson content needs to include multiple and varied visual materials, such as diagrams, concept maps, charts, visual representations that reinforce the concepts. Ebooks are designed to cover specific content. For deaf learners, that content must be translated into sign language. Beyond that, the ebook should have sign language glossaries for the vocabulary being taught. Definitions of concepts must also be available in sign language. Deaf learners need more time to process information, especially written information. If they are a struggling reader, they will need more time and support. Deaf learners need opportunities to interact with peers, both hearing and deaf. To summarize the definitions of the 3 levels of accessibility, Level 1 deals with the courseware and learning management system. Level 2 deals with the learning design and the interface with the learner. Level 3 considers overtly language and communication development. This level supports language acquisition. Now we'll discuss the final framework that will contribute to the new framework we are building. Let's explore open educational resources. We'll start by looking at the relationship between open education practices and open education resources. There are 5 principles of open education practices. The first and foundational principle is that of collaboration and sharing information. Collaboration and sharing should lead to value-added creativity and the production of more resources. The next principle is about initiating and maintaining connection to a community, a network, so that learning and teaching resources and practices are shared so we can better meet the learning needs of students. The objective of open education practices is to grow our collective knowledge and resources, to grow open education access. Our practices should invite critiques and analyses so that the efficacy of the resources and practice, or lack thereof, can be identified so improvements can be made. These inquiries can lead to serendipitous findings and lead to innovations not foreseen. A problem with current open education practices is that they don't always consider multilingual language acquisition. The reality that deaf learners are using a sign and written language hasn't really factored into our practices yet. Current OER and sign language translations are somewhat in conflict. Consider the mediums for the languages. Spoken languages uses text and is audio-centric. Sign languages use video. Video is our paper. Resources need to be translated, but how do we determine who is qualified to do the translations? Translations go in two directions, print to sign and sign to print. Who is qualified though? Are there licensure issues? Another consideration is how the translation will be paid for. These translation expenses are in addition to the cost of the original ebook. Another consideration is how much of the OER can be translated. Producing proper translation takes a lot of time, including studio time. Producing a translated ebook requires high-quality equipment and the human resources to do the editing. It's a big commitment. Here's another consideration. Who is qualified to evaluate the quality of the translation? Who has the power to decide the translation is done well enough? In this regard, it is important that deaf people are involved in the process. If hearing interpreters are involved in creating translations, do they have the necessary skills to do the work? Are they trusted in the community? Do the deaf consultants retain the power to decide the translation is done well enough? These are important issues and should not be overlooked. UNICEF has been a tremendous leader in producing resources to promote digital textbooks or ebooks. UNICEF has identified various stakeholders and their roles in the creation of ebooks. Firstly, the Ministry of Education for the country in question has the power to create policy to encourage or mandate the development of ebooks. Publishers have the platform to make accessible content available to teachers using UDL principles. Technologists support the development of the learning management system and determine the necessary software. Teachers curate the materials, design and plan the lessons, and teach the material. Students are stakeholders as the end user of the ebooks. Non-governmental organizations recruit evaluators to determine the effectiveness of the ebook. Finally, UNICEF provides technical assistance and support to governments for implementation. I would like to genuinely commend UNICEF for all its efforts supporting open education. To finish my presentation, I would like to add 3 more resources to our repertoire of open education resources. First, deaf human resources. Elegant, fluent signers. Ebook creators need to have input from deaf talent. Secondly, linguistic resources. Sign language and linguistic research. These resources can be used to support translation, support learners' language acquisition. It's readily available. Lastly, we need stakeholder groups to support the development and creation of ebooks. So where have I been headed with all of this? I wish to introduce a new framework for open education resources and open education practices. A framework that incorporates universal design principles, deaf aesthetics, all levels of accessibility, and multimodal learning. Future research needs to consider the following questions: an evaluation of this lens or framework by designing an e-book prototype. What steps need to be taken to translate this knowledge to other countries? What features of the prototype work or not work for deaf learners in other countries? We need to investigate the necessary training and infrastructure needed to support ebooks using this framework. And finally, we need to investigate what kind of OER repository would best meet the needs of users. Thank you. I have a link here that you can see to an ebook sample. I invite you to review it. It's part of this presentation, and it'll provide much more information to you. So I suggest you check it out. Again, thank you very much.